Hello ladies and gentlemen, how's it going? Screezilla here, and I hope you're all well. You join me in a very cold, windy, rough Adelaide, and a very noisy Adelaide as well, because I'm down here at Adelaide International Airport. We should see a plane taking off just behind me any second now. There we go. Off into the sky it goes. So yeah, I'm down here at Adelaide International Airport. Not just to look at planes taking off, although it's kind of fun. I'm here for a specific reason today, and that reason is a rather special plane. A rather special plane that's stored here at Adelaide International Airport. Let's go inside and take a look. So here we are in front of a very unassuming building, a rather big grey box in fact. But inside this grey building, it houses a very interesting aeroplane. An aeroplane not many of you have seen, I imagine. Because, well, very few actually exist still. We're here today to look at a very glary, unfortunately there are windows involved here. Phone, stop glaring things. A very glary Vickers Vimy. Now, the Vickers Vimy is a fantastic plane, and this GEAOU, GEAOU, is a special plane because it's a record holder. It's the first plane to fly from England to Australia. In 1919, just 16 years after man's first powered flight, on November the 12th, the plane left Hounslow, London. It took 28 days for the Vickers Vimy to land in Darwin, Australia. For this, the Commonwealth Government awarded it and its crew £10,000, and both Adelaide-born pilots were knighted, Sir Keith and Ross Smith. Yes, they're both brothers. On their amazing journey, they also had a Victorian-born Sergeant Bennett and another South Australian, Sergeant Shears. The mechanics both got a bar for their Air Force medals and got a promotion to Lieutenant. This plane is housed proudly at the Adelaide Airport. Now to the plane itself. Born out of fire and torment of World War I, the Vickers Company were tasked with building a new heavy bomber with twin engines and capable of bombing the heartland of the German Empire. From board to prototype, the FB-27 was made in just 4 months. This speedy process was not limited to just its prototypes. The first plane prototype performed so well, the production started almost immediately. 112 planes were produced initially for World War II and the war efforts. The plane was named after the Battle of Vimy Ridge, where 4 divisions of the Canadian Canadian Ground Forces Corps, Canadian Army, fought against 3 German divisions, so a very large battle indeed. The Vimy made it to France and the war in October of 1918. If you know your history, however, there's not much action involved in that period, as the armistice was signed on November the 11th. The plane was in full military service in 1919, replacing the older Halifax Page O-0-4. The O-400. Sorry, there's too many numbers involved in planes. Although the plane saw little action, it proved to be extremely good at low altitude attack runs. In the second, now let me butcher this, Zhili Fengtong War in China, the plane served very well. However, it did have problems. Low altitude attacks only worked for so long. As the Fengtong forces grew to actually know what was going on, they knew how to counteract this plane, and many were lost. Many actually went on to serve in the Fengtong military, the Fengtong aviation military. The Air Force, that's the word. But were basically all scrapped or shot towards the end. Some of them did make it to the Japanese invading China, but the Japanese basically scrapped them as they were very much outdated at the time. The plane was better known for its civilian work. As a transport plane, air ambulance, and also a civilian plane. It was actually a civilian liner for some time. If we go around the side here, you'll just see how narrow the actual body is. The fuselage of this plane is. It's not a very wide fuselage. So you'll sort of see how narrow it must have been if we don't get too much glare. Unfortunately, the doors are locked. I wish it wasn't, because it would have been great to get in there. Oh well, maybe next time. So as you can see here, the actual body section up to where that window is was pretty much for passengers. They actually widened the fuselage a little bit for the passenger variant. One of the other things this plane was known for is its long distance records, and this is what this plane here is today. It was here because it was a record breaker. It flew from England to Australia. It took, as I said, it took 28 days to get here. Now, I believe this is actually an original. Hi, Editing Scree here. Just a quick one. Yes, there are 2 left in the world, 2 original Vimys, and there are a couple of replicas as well as parts. The other Vimy sits in England. So yeah, this is an original Vimy. It's amazing to see. It's an amazing plane, and it's amazing to see a World War I era bomber in the flesh. It's just beautiful. Now, the actual Vickers Vimy had a number of different variations on its engines. The plane had so many different engines, I couldn't go through them all. We'll just back up here, because you can see the route it took from the world. So, we start off in Hounslow, England, go to Italy, Toronto, Cairo, Damascus, Crete, Iraq, Basra, Iraq, Persia, India, Delhi, India, Allahabad, India, Calcutta, India, Akibar, Burma, Rangoon, Burma, Bangkok, Siam, Singapore, Malaya, Kaladajit, Dutch East Indies, Surabaya, Dutch East Indies, Bima, Dutch East Indies, Atoamba, Dutch East Indies, and finally we got to Darwin in Australia. They almost fell into Darwin because they'd run out of fuel at that stage. And then it flew to Melbourne and then to Adelaide, where it sits now. As I say, the crew were all born in Adelaide, so that's pretty damn cool. There is also this little video that's running just as a sort of, to show the history of this plane. It's an epic story, and it's an epic plane indeed. Gorgeous footage there of the actual Vimy just flying. I think there were a couple of people on board just going between the wings. Just the bravery of these guys to fly from England to Australia in a canvas wooden plane powered by 2 Rolls-Royce engines. And it is just a gorgeous looking plane as well. Sorry, I'm going to waffle on a bit because I just want to keep looking at this thing. And get some B-roll footage as well, maybe, or just use this footage in general. I don't know, I'll waffle on and see what happens. But you can see here, like, if you... Not going to be easy to see on camera, but you can see the canvas work on the actual planes. On the actual wings. And of course it has an open cockpit, because all planes from the 1920s have to have an open cockpit, because screw pilots. Now, of course, when this was actually in bomber form, the front section there, you see the flat top front section, would have had a twin, single Vickers, I think it was, Vickers machine gun on board. I think some of them had Lewis guns as well. And then there would have usually been a gunner behind the pilots as well. Of course, in there you've got your navigators and your mechanics and all of that kind of stuff. You can see just at the front there, you can see the steering wheel used to actually pilot this plane. And fantastic little wooden dashboard there as well. I would love to get up and see it properly. As you can see on its landing gear, it's just been propped up a little bit. On the front, of course, is the wooden skid. Because when you landed, you were generally coming in a bit nose happy, so you needed something to knock it down. Of course, the vital thing on the engines is the actual heat gauges and RPM rev limiter are on the side of the engine. You don't actually have that in the canopy for a plane like this. So you can see both sets either side of the engine there. These are a Rolls-Royce, what was it? It was a Rolls-Royce V12 engine. So the Rolls-Royce V12 engines were installed in this plane. One of them are more reliable engines. But you can see on the side you've got the cranks as well, and that's where the engineers would start the engine. You'd have to crank it over by hand, and those things would be bloody heavy. If you've ever tried to move a V6 or a V8 while it's stationary in a neutral gear, you know how heavy they are. Try doing that to an engine, you know, that is the same sort of weight as a car. It's ridiculous. Of course, it's a biplane, and it's actually got a bi-tail section as well. So it's got the twin tail section at the back there for more lift. Because remember, this plane was developed in the 1918s. Sorry, words are hard. So aviation was not at its best. The little spinny thing on the front there is a gauge for speed, usually. At the side, you can see the pilot has a headrest, which is very nice of them to put an actual headrest in a plane. Very rare for pilots to get thought of with that. And then these beautiful tyres, of course. Usually vulcanized rubber, very hard, not very comfortable to land on, of course. We'll just switch cameras quickly, just so you can get an idea of the size of this thing. I mean, I'm sure you can get a bit of a picture of it, because you can see where the pilot sits. Okay, so let's get a look at the scale of this plane. So as you can see, I'm about 5'10", and the nose is just probably about 5'6". So relatively tall plane. As you can see, the propellers themselves are probably about 7 foot. So very big propellers, of course. Oh, hand. Now this plane, of course, has the Rolls-Royce engines, as I said. Very reliable engines. This plane also holds the record for one of the first planes to cross the Atlantic. One of these were actually specially converted and had a full fuel cell down into this midsection there. All of that was fuel, which is always safe. Now, one of the actual prototypes was lost after the initial build. So they were still making prototypes long after they'd actually built the production models. Because of the quick turnaround, they'd only built the first prototype before they'd started building them. Now, the prototype that was lost was actually carrying a payload of bombs. And when it came into land, it landed a bit heavy on those old wheels. And as you can see, there's really not much in the way of suspension on this thing. You're pretty much boned if you land a bit hard. It has got fantastic drum brakes though. And of course you've got the lovely sledge on the front. But unfortunately it landed a bit heavy. And when you do that with a big plane, and especially with the fantastically reliable World War I era bombs, they tended to go kaboom. So the prototype variant didn't last very long. There was not much left of it or its crew after it crashed. There was a small 12-ring crater though where it used to be. Now the Vickers Vimy went on, and it was of vital importance to mail delivery in many small countries. It did a fantastic job, and it was going until the mid 1920s, late 1920s, early 30s. They still had a few of these just buzzing around, very rarely, but they were still going. Utterly beautiful plane though. Now in modern money, the £10,000 winnings would convert to around about $780,000. So yeah, quite a good winnings back then. 27 days and 20 hours to get from England to Australia back then. But as you can see, the tail there, you can actually see the tail skids. So it has 3 sets of skids, 2 on the outside, 1 on the inside. The one on the inside is the main one. If that buckles, then you've still got 2 on the underside of your rear wing. Of course, it's going to damage the rear wing a fair bit, but it's still better than it tearing off. You can actually see the visual port underneath the G/E, which is kind of cool. That's where one of the mechanics would sit and basically just look at things as they were flying, mainly looking at the ailerons and things like that, just checking everything was working in flight. Of course, the great thing about biplanes were you could basically walk on them as they were flying and fix them as they went. And a couple of repairs were needed on this plane as it was flying. Alright guys, well I hope you've enjoyed this little video and a little snippet of history. I've definitely enjoyed coming down here to see it. Hopefully one day I'll actually manage to sneak my way in there for something. Because I would love to get up and close and personal with this. maybe if this video reaches a couple of 100,000 views or something like that, and I get some good stuff for the company that's looking after this. This is all basically done by what's that word? That word I'm trying to think of. Donations and things like that. And they are constantly trying to nick it, especially Melbourne's trying to steal this plane. It may go down to the Port Adelaide Aviation Museum as well. But hopefully it will stay in Adelaide. That's the main thing. It's got a beautiful little spot in South Australia. Let's just walk outside quickly and I'll show you the beautiful hangar building it's set in. We don't get blinded by the sun. Where did that come from? Oh good God, it's so bright. But as you can see, the Vickers Vimy hangar, an unsuspecting little place just on the outskirts of the airport. Luckily I just stopped recording because the plane just came taxiing past as soon as I finished. I'm glad I finished what I did.